What would you do if your best friend took your husband? Not just emotionally, but completely? Would you fight? Would you cry? Or would you wait? Because I didn't react the way they expected. I smiled, and that confused them. Her name was Callista Viral, my best friend for 8 years. She knew everything about me, my fears, my dreams, even my marriage struggles. And my husband, Darian Solis, charming, confident, the kind of man people trusted too easily, including me. The betrayal didn't happen overnight. No, it started small. Late-night calls, inside jokes, long conversations that didn't include me anymore. At first, I ignored it, because who suspects their best friend? But then one night, I saw the message. Not meant for me. Can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore. And just like that, everything changed. I didn't confront them immediately. Strange, right? Most people would explode. But I didn't, because something told me this wasn't the full story yet. Instead, I watched. Carefully, quietly, like someone learning a game before making a move. Have you ever noticed how people reveal more when they think you don't know? That's exactly what happened. Callista started coming over more often. Too often. Laughing louder, staying longer. And Darian, he didn't even try to hide it anymore. One evening, I walked into the living room and saw them sitting closer than usual. Too close. They pulled apart quickly when they saw me, but not fast enough. And still, I said nothing, because silence can be more powerful than confrontation. Why didn't I say anything? Why didn't I stop them? Because I needed them to feel safe. Safe enough to make mistakes. And they did. One night, Darian left his phone on the kitchen counter. Unlocked. Careless. I picked it up. Messages. Photos, plans. Not just an affair. A future. Together. They weren't just sneaking around. They were planning a life. Without me. And that's when I realized something important. This wasn't just betrayal. This was replacement. But here's the thing. They thought they were ahead. They thought they were in control. They had no idea. I was already thinking 10 steps ahead. The next morning, I made breakfast. Like nothing happened. Darian smiled at me. Callista laughed at something he said. And I watched them both. Do you know what's strange? How easily people lie. When they believe you trust them. Everything okay? Darian asked. I nodded. Of course. And that was the moment. I decided to let them win. Not forever. Just long enough. Because sometimes, the best way to destroy a lie is to let it grow. A week later, Callista told me something shocking. I think Darian and I are getting closer, she said. Closer? She said it like she was confessing. Like she expected guilt. But I just looked at her. Come. Still. Do you think that's a problem? I asked. She hesitated. Just for a second. Then smiled. No. I think it's natural. Natural. That word stayed with me. Because betrayal is never natural. It's chosen. And now, they had both chosen. So I made my decision too. I started preparing. Quietly. Carefully. Finances first. Accounts. Assets. Documents. Everything I needed. To take back control. Because if they were planning a future without me, I would make sure they didn't benefit from my past. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. Darian sat me down one evening. I think we need space, he said. There it was. The official lie. But I just nodded. Okay. His eyes widened slightly. He didn't expect that. Because he thought I would fight. Cry. Beg. But I didn't. And that's when they made their biggest mistake. Darian moved out within days. Not alone, but into a place Callista had already prepared. Did they think I wouldn't find out? Or did they simply stop caring? I visited the property records, quietly. Her name wasn't the only one listed. Mine was tied to the funds used. That was their first mistake. They built their new life using pieces of mine. I began reclaiming everything legally. Accounts frozen. Transfers flagged. Every signature reviewed. They thought they were stepping into freedom, but they were stepping into a trap built from their own actions. Their relationship changed quickly. What starts in secrecy rarely survives truth. They argued. Neighbors noticed. Messages became colder. Because now they had each other fully. And suddenly, that wasn't enough. Callista reached out first. Not as a friend, but as someone desperate. We need to talk, she said. But I had already moved past that point. Darian tried next. Apologies. Regret. Words that came too late. Because remorse after exposure is not change. It's fear. Legal consequences hit harder than emotions ever could. The house. Frozen. Accounts. Investigated. Their new life. Paused. I watched from a distance. Not with anger, but clarity. Because revenge isn't loud. It's precise. Their bond broke exactly how it began. Quietly, without trust. Because betrayal doesn't build strong foundations. I thought it was over when Callista disappeared. No calls, no messages, no explanations. Just silence. And for a moment, I believed that was the end of her role in my story. I was wrong. 3 weeks later, I received a package. No return address, no name. Just my full name written neatly across the front. Inside was a phone, old, scratched, locked, and a single note. You deserve to hear what he said when you weren't there. My heart didn't race. It didn't need to, because something deeper had already settled inside me. I charged the phone, waited, watched the screen light up slowly, and when it finally unlocked, there was only one thing on it. A voice recording. I hesitated, just for a second, because once you hear something like that, you can't unhear it. Then I pressed play. Darian's voice filled the room. Clear, calm, familiar. But the words weren't. I was never going to stay with her, he said. I just needed time to move things around properly. My breath slowed, not quickened, slowed, because I wasn't shocked anymore. I was learning. But then, another voice entered the recording. A man's voice. Unknown. Cold. You've done this before, the man said. And suddenly, everything changed. I replayed the recording 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I needed to be sure I heard it correctly. You've done this before. That line echoed in my mind. Before. Before me? Before Callista? How many times had this happened? And how many people were involved? I kept listening. Carefully. This time, I focused on the second voice. Different woman. Same pattern. The man continued. You get close. You build trust. Then you shift assets before you leave. Assets. Not emotions. Not relationships. Assets. That was the moment something inside me shifted again. Because this wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was strategy. A method. A system. Darian wasn't just unfaithful. He was practiced. And then came the line that made everything colder. She was the easiest one, Darian said. She trusted me completely. Silence filled the room. But it didn't feel empty. It felt heavy. Because I realized something terrifying. He wasn't just talking about me. He was describing a process. And suddenly, I wasn't just someone who had been betrayed. I was someone who had been studied. The more I listened, the clearer it became. Darian hadn't acted alone. The man in the recording wasn't just a friend. He sounded professional, controlled, detached. You need to be more careful this time, the man said. She has access to the accounts. She won't check, Darian replied confidently. She never does. That sentence hit differently. Not because it hurt, but because it exposed something deeper. He didn't just rely on trust. He relied on assumption, predictability. And for a long time, he had been right. But not anymore. I paused the recording, sat back, and asked myself a question I hadn't considered before. Who was the other man? Because if Darian had a system, then someone had taught him, or at least guided him. And that meant something bigger was hiding behind all of this. Something organized. Something intentional. I looked at the phone again, and noticed something I hadn't before. A second file. Hidden. The second file wasn't labeled. No title, no date. Just a blank icon. I opened it slowly. And this time, what I saw wasn't audio. It was video. Grainy. Distant. Recorded without anyone noticing. The camera pointed into a room. A meeting room. And sitting at the table was Darian. But he wasn't alone. There were 3 other men. Well-dressed. Composed. Watching him closely. One of them leaned forward. We're expanding, he said. New targets. New regions. Targets. The word echoed like a warning. Another man spoke. You've proven you can handle emotional integration. Emotional integration. They weren't talking about relationships. They were talking about manipulation. Structured, planned, refined. And then, my name appeared. She's stable, Darian said. Financially secure. No suspicion patterns. I felt something shift inside me. Not pain. Not anger. Something colder. Understanding. Because in that moment, I saw the full picture. I wasn't just betrayed by a husband. I was selected. I sat there for a long time after the video ended. The room felt different. Quieter. Heavier. Because everything I thought I understood was only the surface. Darian wasn't just a man who made bad choices. He was part of something. Something structured. Something hidden. And suddenly, Callista's role didn't look the same either. Was she just another victim? Or was she part of it too? That question stayed with me. Because I remembered something she said before she disappeared. I think you deserve to know everything. Everything. Not just Darian. Not just the affair. Everything. Which meant one thing. She knew more than she told me. And if she knew more, then why disappear? Was she running? Or was she being silenced? I looked at the phone again. At the files. At the truth that had only just begun to unfold. And for the first time since this all started, I realized something unsettling. This story wasn't ending. It was opening. Because if Darian was just one piece, then how many others were out there? And the most dangerous question of all, had they already moved on to their next target? And this time, would I stop them? Or become part of something even bigger? 3 nights after I found the recordings, someone knocked on my door. Not loud, not urgent, just steady. I wasn't expecting anyone, and something about the timing felt wrong. Too precise. I walked slowly to the door. Didn't open it immediately. Instead, I checked the camera. And for a second, I thought I was imagining things. Because standing there was Callista. Not the version I remembered. Not the polished, confident woman who smiled while taking my life apart. This version looked different. Pale. Tired. Uneasy. She wasn't dressed like herself either. No elegance and no effort. Just urgency. I opened the door halfway. What do you want? I asked. She didn't smile. Didn't pretend. They're watching you, she said. Not hello. Not I'm sorry. They're watching you. And suddenly, the air between us changed. Because I believed her. I didn't invite her in immediately. That would have been a mistake. Instead, I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, creating distance. Control. Who's watching me? I asked. Callista looked around before answering, like someone afraid of being seen. Not just Darian, she said. That confirmed everything I had already suspected. But what came next made it worse. They're organized, she continued. They don't just manipulate relationships. They build profiles, patterns, targets. Targets. That word again. And me. I asked quietly. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. You were chosen, she admitted. Chosen. Not random. Not accidental. Selected. For what? She met my eyes this time. And for the first time, I saw fear. Control, she said. I let her inside. Not because I trusted her, but because I needed answers. She sat down slowly, like someone who hadn't rested in days. I didn't know at first, she said. That line sounded familiar, almost rehearsed. But then she added something different. I thought I was helping him. Helping. He told me you were distant, that you were hiding things, that he needed someone to understand him. I stayed silent. Let her talk. That's how it starts, she said. Emotion first. Trust second. Access third. Access. To accounts. I asked. To everything, she replied. And suddenly, I understood the full structure. They didn't just break relationships. They replaced them. But why come back now? I asked. Callista's expression changed. From fear to something else. Guilt. Because I wasn't just used, she said. I waited. I was being prepared. That sentence hit differently. Prepared for what? She swallowed. To do what he did. You mean to someone else? She nodded slowly. They were training me. Training. Not a mistake. Not an accident. A system. They test loyalty, Callista said. How? She looked down. By making you cross lines you can't come back from. I felt the weight of that sentence. And if you refuse, She met my eyes again. They replace you. Replace. Just like they tried to replace me. But now, something didn't add up. You left, I said. She shook her head. No. I ran. Why now? I asked again. Because they're moving faster, she said. That didn't sound good. They've already started again, she added. My chest tightened slightly. With who? She hesitated, and that hesitation felt heavier than anything else. You don't know her, she said. That should have been comforting. But it wasn't, because if the pattern continued, there would always be another. Callista pulled out her phone. This is what I took before I left, she said. Files. Names. Locations. It wasn't just one group. It was multiple. Connected. Expanding. And suddenly, Darian looked smaller. Not less dangerous. Just not the center. Why help me? I asked. Callista didn't answer immediately. Then she said something unexpected. Because you didn't become like them. That caught me off guard. I almost did, she added quietly. Almost. And that word carried more weight than anything else. We can expose them, she said. We. That word again. But this time, it felt different. Not trust. Not yet. But possibility. And risk. Because going deeper meant one thing. There was no turning back. That night, after Callista left, I sat alone again. The files open, the truth unfolding. But one thought wouldn't leave me. If they were watching me before, were they watching me now? I walked to the window slowly. Looked outside. Nothing unusual. Just quiet. Still. Too still. And then my phone lit up. Unknown number. One message. We see you. I stared at the screen. Not afraid. Not frozen. Just aware. Because now I understood something clearly. This wasn't just a story about betrayal anymore. It was a game. And I had just stepped into it. The only question left was I still a target? Or was I about to become something they didn't expect? The message didn't disappear. We see you. It stayed on my screen longer than it should have, like it wanted to be remembered. Like it wanted to settle into my mind and live there. Not a threat. Not quite. More like a confirmation. I didn't respond. Because this wasn't about reacting anymore. This was about positioning. I stood still in the middle of my living room, the faint glow of my phone lighting up the space around me. Then, slowly, I reached over and turned off the lights. The house sank into darkness, and for a moment, I let myself adjust, not just to the lack of light, but to the shift in control. If they were watching, then they were expecting something. Fear, movement, panic. But I gave them none of it. Instead, I did something they wouldn't predict. I sat down, calmly, deliberately, and opened Callista's files again. Names, dates, locations, patterns. This time, I wasn't reading like a victim searching for answers. I was reading like someone studying an enemy. And then I noticed something. Repetition. Certain names appeared across multiple files, different cities, different timelines, different targets. At first glance, it looked random. But it wasn't. These weren't just participants. They were anchors. People who stayed constant while everything else changed. Which meant there was structure. Hierarchy. A system designed to operate quietly beneath everything else. And Darian? He wasn't at the top. Not even close. If anything, he was just one of many. And suddenly, the message on my phone felt different. We see you. Not a warning. A test. The next morning, I changed everything. Not dramatically. Not in a way anyone could easily point out. Subtly, I shifted my routines. A different grocery store on the opposite side of town. A longer route to places I used to reach in minutes. I left earlier than usual, then sometimes later, just to disrupt any pattern that might have been forming. Because if they were watching, I wanted to see if they would follow. And they did. It started small. Barely noticeable. A dark-colored car parked 2 houses down the street. At first, I ignored it. Could have been anyone. Could have been nothing. But then I saw it again. Different street. Same distance behind me. Then again. 3 times in one day. Not close enough to alarm. But too consistent to ignore. Good. That meant I wasn't guessing anymore. I was confirming. That afternoon, I called Callista. They're still tracking me, I said. Her voice didn't change. They won't stop, she replied calmly. Not unless you disappear, or become useful. Useful. That word stayed with me long after the call ended. Because now, I understood what it meant. Not a victim. Not a target. An asset. Someone they could use instead of eliminate. What if I choose the second option? I asked quietly. There was a pause on the line. A long one. When she finally spoke, her voice had shifted. More serious, more careful. Then you won't just be watched anymore, she said. You'll be tested. I leaned back slightly, absorbing that. I already am, I replied. And for the first time since this began. I meant it. We didn't meet at my house again. That would have been reckless. Predictable. Instead, we chose somewhere public. Crowded enough to disappear into, but controlled enough to observe. One of those cafes where conversations blend into background noise and no one pays attention unless you give them a reason to. Callista arrived before me. I noticed her immediately. Not because she stood out, but because of how she didn't. She sat with her back to the wall, eyes subtly scanning the room, not in panic but in calculation. Every entrance, every exit, every reflection in the glass. She wasn't just afraid. She was trained. You've changed, I said as I sat across from her. She gave a faint, tired smile. You have no idea. There was no defensiveness in her tone. Just truth. I leaned forward slightly. Then show me. Her eyes met mine. Not like before. Not as a friend. But as someone assessing risk. Why are you doing this? She asked. Revenge. Justice. Survival. Each word landed differently. Each one a possible answer. But none of them felt right anymore. Control, I said. The word hung between us. Heavy. Clear. And something shifted in her expression. Not surprise. Recognition. Because she understood. And that's when she nodded. Slowly. Deliberately. Then you're ready to learn, she said. The first rule, Callista began, her voice low and steady, is emotional detachment. I didn't interrupt. Not this time. Because I was starting to understand. This wasn't advice. It was training. Not because emotions are weak, she continued, but because they are predictable. That word again. Predictable. The same assumption Darian had made about me. The same mistake he relied on. They build profiles based on reactions, she said. How you respond to stress, betrayal, loss, fear. I thought back to everything. Every moment I had stayed calm. Every silence I had chosen. Maybe without realizing it, I had already started breaking their system. And then, I asked quietly, they use it against you, she said. Simple. Direct. Final. So what do I do? She leaned closer. You break your pattern. Completely. That night, I made my first real move. Not against them. Against expectation. I posted online. Photos of myself. Smiling. Out at dinner. Walking through familiar places. A life that looked normal. Stable. Even happy. To anyone watching, it would seem like recovery. Healing. Moving on. But that wasn't the point. The point was confusion. Because confusion slows people down. And hesitation creates openings. The next day, something changed. The car didn't follow me. Not once. They were recalibrating. Adjusting. Trying to understand the shift. And that meant I had disrupted their system. The call came that evening. Unknown number. I answered. Silence. Then, you're adapting faster than expected. A man's voice. Calm. Controlled. Not Darian. Something higher. Should I be flattered? I asked. A quiet chuckle. You should be careful. Why? Because curiosity has consequences. So does underestimating people, I replied. Silence. Then, we'll be watching. The line went dead. Callista didn't hesitate when I told her. That wasn't a watcher, she said. That was management. And suddenly, everything felt bigger. Higher stakes. Higher risk. We mapped everything. Names. Connections. Patterns. Until one stood out. A name that appeared everywhere, but never directly. A presence without a face. He designs the system, Callista said. That night, I sat alone again. Phone in hand. Another message appeared. Ready to stop being a target? Or do you want to understand how this really works? This wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. And invitations are harder to refuse than fear. My fingers hovered over the screen. Because I knew. If I said yes, I wouldn't just be fighting them anymore. I would be stepping inside, becoming something else, something they didn't expect. And maybe that was exactly what I needed, ready to stop being a target. The message sat on my screen like a quiet challenge. Not urgent, not aggressive, just waiting. Or do you want to understand how this really works? I read it again, then again, because this wasn't just a decision, it was a doorway. And I knew something instinctively. Once I stepped through it, there would be no returning to who I used to be. No more reacting. No more surviving. Only strategy. I typed slowly. I'm listening. I didn't send it immediately. My thumb hovered over the screen for a moment longer than necessary, as if my body needed to catch up with the decision my mind had already made. Then, I pressed send. 3 seconds passed. Then 5. Then 10. And just when I thought the silence was the answer, my phone buzzed. Good. Just one word. But it carried weight. Not approval. Acknowledgement. Another message followed. Tomorrow. 7 p.m. Come alone. Then an address. No explanation. No instructions. Just expectation. I stared at it, memorizing every detail. Because something told me this wasn't a meeting. It was an evaluation. And I wasn't the only one being tested. I didn't tell Callista immediately. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I wasn't sure who was being watched more closely, her or me. Instead, I prepared quietly, carefully, the same way they would. I studied the address first. An office building on the edge of the city. Nothing remarkable, which made it more dangerous. Places that blend in are harder to question. At exactly 6:40 p.m., I left my house. No sudden changes, no signs of urgency, just another routine outing. But inside, everything was calculated. Every turn, every mirror glance, every passing car. If they were watching, I wanted them to believe I was walking in blind. I arrived 10 minutes early. Didn't go inside immediately. He led me down a hallway I hadn't noticed before, hidden behind what looked like a plain wall panel. Subtle, almost invisible, which made sense. Everything about them was designed not to be seen. The room we entered was different, larger, darker. Screens lined the walls. Data, profiles, faces, dozens of them, each one tagged, categorized, tracked. "This is what you think we do," he said. "Manipulation, replacement, control." I stayed silent, because I knew there was more. "There's a second layer," he continued, and with a single motion, he pulled up a different set of files. These weren't individuals. They were networks, connections between people, families, businesses, financial flows. "You don't just target people," I said slowly. "You target influence." He looked at me, this time impressed. "Now you're starting to see it." Darian suddenly made sense. Not a mastermind, not even special, just positioned, used where he fit best. "And Callista?" I asked. A slight pause. Then, an experiment. That word landed heavier than anything else. Because it meant she was never meant to succeed, only to evolve. "You're not recruiting me," I said quietly. It wasn't a question. It was a realization. He turned slightly, almost amused. "No," he replied. "We're evaluating you." That made more sense. Because recruitment implies choice. Evaluation implies judgment. "And if I fail?" I asked. "You won't," he said calmly. Confidence, not arrogance. Certainty. That was more dangerous. "Because failure would mean you're predictable," he added. "And you're not." I absorbed that. Because for the first time, they weren't looking at me as a victim. They were studying me as something rare, unstable, unmapped. "And if I pass?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward one of the screens. Tapped it once. A new file opened. My file. Every detail. Every reaction. Every decision I had made since the beginning. "You don't join us," he said finally. "You redesign the system." That wasn't an offer. That was power. I stared at the screen, at my own life reduced to patterns and probabilities. And for a moment, I understood everything. Not just what they did, but why it worked. People are predictable, until they choose not to be. And that was the flaw. The one thing their system couldn't fully control. Choice. "You made one mistake," I said slowly. He looked at me, interested, not defensive. "You believe control comes from prediction," I continued. "It doesn't." Silence. "You can map behavior," I added, "but you can't own decision." That was the difference. The line they couldn't cross. And for the first time, I saw it. A crack. Small, but real. "You think I'm here to join you," I said. A slight smile touched his lips. "Aren't you?" "No," I replied. And that was the moment everything shifted. The room didn't explode into chaos. No alarms. No panic. Just stillness. The kind that comes right before something irreversible. "I came here to understand you," I said calmly. "And now I do." The man watched me carefully. Not angry. Not threatened. Just calculating. "You rely on patterns," I continued. "Trust. Emotion. Predictability." I took a slow step forward. "But you forgot something." Silence. "What is that?" he asked. "People learn. And when they do, they change the system." That was the moment. Not loud. Not dramatic. But final. Because I wasn't walking away as a victim anymore. Or even as someone seeking revenge. I was walking away as something else entirely. Something they hadn't accounted for. I turned. Walked toward the door. No one stopped me. No one tried. Because they understood something now, too. Stopping me would prove my point. As I stepped outside, the air felt different. Not lighter. Not safer. Just clearer. My phone buzzed again. One final message. "We'll be watching." I looked at it, then smiled. Not because I was afraid, but because I finally understood the truth. They weren't watching me anymore. They were waiting. Because now, I wasn't the target, and I wasn't the player. I was the disruption. And this time, I was the one rewriting the rules.